What is up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about why I hate loving this Alpha 5100 camera. So I recently have been deciding on a new purchase of a camera, and Sony is an excellent camera brand. They've come a long ways. I think on paper they're probably far ahead of their competition, Nikon and Canon. And I've been a Canon shooter for a few years. I have a bunch of Canon stuff, and it was really tough to make the call to go to Sony. But finally, I decided I was going to go to Sony. I already own this Alpha 5100 camera. This is the bottom of the line when it comes to interchangeable lenses on the Sony system, and it's an excellent camera. I mean, it is fantastic. Video on this thing, up to 60 frames a second, full HD, 1080p. In the XAVCS codec, which is an amazing codec. I think it's one of the better. It's far better than the motion JPEGs in the Canon equipment. Stills, 24 megapixel sensor. It takes amazing stills. The low light performance on a camera at this price point is amazing. I mean, it's phenomenal. It really is. Dynamic range of this little tiny camera is another thing that is amazing. It's great. On paper, it's awesome. But this is where the problems start. So, we got down to the beach. A few problems here. The park is closed, obviously, because it's like 4:30 in the morning. But we're going to see if we can't make our way down to the beach. See what happens. So the other day, I have a Canon DSLR, the one I'm filming on right now. I have this camera as well. I went to the beach to go take some sunrise photos. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I drove down to the beach. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning, rather. I drove down to the beach, and I got there. I set up my tripod, started taking some long exposure shots on this camera, got some pretty cool results. And then I ran into the first problem that I have with Sony. I was only out there for about 30 minutes. I had probably taken about 4 30-second exposures, and I had watched my battery drop from 90% to 78%. And I only had taken 4 photos at that time. Granted, they're long exposures, but still, I mean, it was a little ridiculous. But all wasn't lost. I sat there and waited for the sun to come up, had plenty of battery left to do that. The wind started picking up really bad right at sunrise, and it was about 40 degrees outside. I was trying to manually focus out to the horizon. The camera was in autofocus, so to change focus you have to dive into the menu, whereas on my Canon camera you just push a button on the top, scroll a little clicky wheel on the top, and you set your focus modes. That easy, that quick. It took, I don't know, what seemed like an eternity to change the focus modes on it. That was issue number 1. Then I snapped a picture. It was pretty good, but then I wanted to recompose the shot. So the second problem started when I wanted to take a bracketed shot. I was going to take an HDR bracketed shot so I can expose for the shadows in the foreground as well as the bright sunrise that was coming up in the horizon. So I'm trying to set it up. The wind's blowing like crazy. My fingers are freezing cold, and it was so frustrating that I decided there is no way that I could go into the Sony system. Now, I've held and I've handled the 6000 series, the 6000, the 6300, 6500. Those are a little better. You do get a dedicated wheel on the back for adjusting things like aperture, shutter priority, or aperture, shutter, and ISO. Sorry, I couldn't think there for a minute. A lot easier to get to on those cameras. Even still, the menu dive, I feel like I'm operating a rocket ship on this thing. And it was so annoying that I immediately made the decision that I couldn't go Sony. And what's funny about this is that I went down there, say that the Sony Alpha 5100 camera is in such an excellent camera, I'm going to start investing in the Sony platform. With getting an A6500 was the plan. So after that frustrating experience, I took my Canon out. I used the Canon. I got some excellent photos of the sun coming up over the horizon at the beach. And I started walking around as the sun had already risen and the light levels were pretty stable. I was getting some nice morning light. I walked around, pulled this thing back out whenever, and just walked around with it. And for that, I loved it again. Like, I hated it when I got there. I loved it when I got there. Decided that I hated it. And then I was walking around capturing some excellent photos with this little tiny camera. I started to vlog some of that while I was down at the beach, and the audio is terrible. We're out at the Folly Beach Park here, and we're shooting the sunrise. And it is absolutely gorgeous. But the reason I'm out here today is because I want to review the Sony Alpha 5100. That's what I'm recording on right now. This audio that you're hearing right now. Hopefully the wind noise isn't too bad, otherwise this video is going to suck. So the other problem with this A5100 is that there's no headphone jack. It's so disappointing that there's no headphone jack on this, because if not, this would be the absolute perfect vlogging camera. The video, like I already mentioned, is fantastic. It's got this nice flip out screen, and you know, it'd be perfect for a little vlogging rig. And if it just had that audio port so that you can get some nice clean audio. What I've been doing for my vlogs, because I am using this for vlogging, is just using a separate audio source and syncing the two in post. But that just creates more work, more, you know, every time that you stop your video, you have to stop your audio, and then you have to sync up again on the next clip. And it just creates a huge amount of work in post. So it's not ideal at all. So one of the other cool things that's awesome about this camera is this price point that you're jumping into the Sony camera at. Listen to this. Wow. Now, since we've done that, let's go over the other thing that I hate about this camera, is that whenever you take that many shots and you use that awesome frames per second that you get, you can't view any of them for a while. It just times out. So I talked about the video features of this camera. I think we'll just change over to this camera and let you pick out for yourself. So one of the things I didn't mention when I was filming on the Sony camera, or I'm sorry, the Canon camera, is how good the Sony camera is at tracking faces. So it's got automatic face detection, and it's going to keep me in focus no matter where I'm at in frame. I'm shooting right now at this kit lens's lowest aperture of f3.5, and if I get right up here to the lens, you can see the background's pretty blurry, and it continues to track me as I move, which is another awesome feature about this camera. The problem that I had, and I mentioned earlier with this camera, is the fact that there's no headphone jack, and it's going to pick up audio everywhere. Like my daughter just opened the door, it's going to pick that up. So it's going to have stereo audio.
Hi.
Hello.
Daddy, look, I got on leggings.
Yes, you do. But the other cool thing is, I'm glad she walked out here, because now it's tracking both of our faces. Lean up there to the lens. Now it's tracking her. Can it track me too? Hello. Anyway, its autofocus in this camera is fantastic. So the only problem is, as I mentioned before, is the audio is going to be this. This is all you get with it. Because there's no audio jack, you're stuck recording audio separately and having to sync those up in post, which, like I said, is so much more work than it should be. So the Alpha 5100 camera, who's it for? I would say that this is an excellent first camera. If you can operate a rocket ship, it's an excellent first camera. The photos that you're going to get out of this thing are fantastic. There's no viewfinder, which is another huge bummer for me. I really wish it had a viewfinder. But the fact that you get such great pictures out of this thing in such a small package. This kit lens that I'm using is actually the old kit lens, where it's the new one is actually a little pancake lens with a little rocker on the side to zoom, electric zoom. And if you had that lens, I don't think that if it was my camera, I probably wouldn't invest in another lens. The OSS in the OSS in the kit lenses is fantastic. The lens is much sharper than a lot of the Canon and Nikon kit lenses that are issued, at least in my experience. And it's so good, but I hate that I love it so much. And I wish Canon, if you're listening, if you ever listen to any of my videos, come on. You have to get on par with these guys. You really need to. So anyway, who's it for? I would say that this would be an excellent first camera. If you had a little pancake lens like the new kit lens, it would be a perfect little throw in your pocket. I mean, look at the size of this thing. It's tiny. Throw it in your pocket, throw it in your purse, throw it in your duffel bag, in your little, what do they call those things? Little zip thing, zip pouch? Fanny pack. Fanny pack. Throw it in your fanny pack. And yeah, just walk around with it because you're going to be extremely happy with the results you get out of this camera. I'm not going to continue to talk any more about the features, and I'll just show you some pictures that I was able to capture with this little guy. So excellent little camera, frustratingly amazing little camera. Strongly recommended getting. Just know that there's so many limitations with this particular camera, as well as going into the Sony system, period. So, anyway, thanks for listening to the little rambling I had. If you thought this video was helpful at all, hit the thumbs up button. It helps a lot. Hit the subscribe button. I think I'm up to 50 subs right now, so awesome. Thank you guys for that, and we'll catch you in the next one.